Hey y'all, so we're starting as we normally do with a primer. This is the AOA Studios Perfect Eyeshadow Primer. This one's in nude or sheer. I just put that all over the lid to prime. Now I'm taking Ben Nye cream colors in white like I always do and putting that all over the lid, blending it out. I'm using this W7 Delicious palette. It's in like the berry tones. I think it's like Berry Natural or something. This is basically their dupe of the ABH Modern Renaissance palette. I'm taking that pink shade on a fluffy Wet n Wild brush and just throwing that color in my crease. These colors are pretty lightly pigmented, so they just take a lot of building and some working with, but it's definitely not a bad palette. And if you are looking for some tones similar to Modern Renaissance, but you don't got the coin because we struggling, I actually do think this is a pretty decent palette. But like I said, you really got to build up the colors. Like as you can see, I am building up that soft pink. And now I'm taking this hot pink, which is a lot more pigmented, but it's definitely like a brighter, more intense shade. So I'm throwing that in my crease. I'm using this little rounded brush to do that, and I'm just building that hot pink up in my crease as well. And I'm kind of smoking it out, like kind of making it be a little angle. Now I'm taking this much deeper berry tone. As you can tell, this shade is powdery as hell. I mean, they're all pretty powdery, like a bunch of shadow just flicked all over the place. But this one is super, super pigmented. I'm using this small matte crease brush so I can really get up in there. And I'm just intensifying that color, like deepening it up in the crease. I'm going back to the fluffier brush and blending upwards, making sure that everything just kind of gradients out and that the lightest pink is at the closer to the brow bone. Now I'm taking this deep, I don't even know what you'd call this color. It's kind of like a brownish copper kind of color. I'm taking that on this kind of fluffy brush. I sprayed it too with my e.l.f. setting spray just to make the shadow pop a little more. I will say that about the shimmers as well. They're not bad, but they're definitely not like intense shimmers. They definitely work a lot better while wet or within like a glitter glue under them. I'm just gonna do a little halo eye. I'm taking that dark shimmer, putting it on the outer and inner corners. Now I'm taking this light pink shimmer on this like dense eyeshadow brush, and I sprayed that as well and just placed that in the center of the two dark colors and kind of blended all of them together where they met. And now I'm using my finger to kind of like blend out the edges where they're a little rough to intensify the color a bit, make it a little deeper. Once I went back and blended some more, I was pretty happy with everything. I deepened up the crease a little bit more. It wasn't dark enough for me. But also you don't have to go like this intense. And now I'm just adding that darker pink. I'm taking it up a little higher, like above the crease, up towards the brow bone, and blending it into that lighter soft pink. Now moving on to eyeliner, I'm taking my Milani Eye Tech Extreme eyeliner pen in Blackest Black, and I'm doing a wing. I gotta say, I don't know what's going on here, but my eyes are not gonna look the same. I did like a wing on one eye and a cat eye on the other, but I do go back and fix it so that they match more. Yeah, I don't know what was going on. Like, those are not even remotely the same. What was I doing? Now I'm moving on to primer. I did take my what is that called? My Lancome primer and put that on, but I also used my e.l.f. Putty Primer in this like parts of my face where my skin is more oily because that other primer is pretty glowy. And I just kind of mixed those two primers together all over my face. While my primer was drying down, I decided to do my mascara. I figured that that would be good to do before I did my foundation anyway. So I'm using the Rimmel London Scandaleyes Mascara. And now I'm taking the Wet n Wild Photo Focus Foundation. This is in the color Dark Mahogany, I think. And this shade is pretty... Their shade selection as a whole is like not my favorite. None of the shades are really good, at least for me. This shade is... The color itself isn't too bad, but the undertone of it is really off. It's really warm and red toned. So I'm mixing a little bit of this AOA Studios concealer in to lighten it up a little bit, hopefully take out some of the redness. I only used a tiny bit of that concealer because it's pretty thick. I really just needed something to balance out the color. And I'm just kind of like trying to blend it all together. I put some of the concealer onto my sponge and then blended it over the foundation I already had on. I just kind of kept working until everything looked a bit more even. Now I'm using the e.l.f. Camo Concealer in, this is Deep Cinnamon, and I'm putting on a decent amount of that. The dark circles are intense. And I'm just blending that out really quick using my e.l.f. sponge. I'm highlighting the rest of my face. I added a little bit more because I wanted to let that dry down a bit before I blended it out. So I added a little bit more on my under eyes and like let it sit and dry while I blended out the rest of the concealer on my face. And now I'm just going to set that. I'm using the AOA Studios Perfect Loose loose eyeshadow. What am I talking about? Loose, what's it called? Loose powder. It's in the shade Warm. And I'm just kind of using my sponge to press that on. Then I blended out my under eyes and set them as well. I set them like with a lot of powder. Just because, I don't know, this powder is so finely milled that like you pick up a lot. So do be careful of that if you like want to use this. It can get kind of cakey. But I like a lot of powder because, you know, like I always say, I got oily skin. I'm using the e.l.f. Flawless Finishing Powder. This is in the shade Dark. And I'm just kind of blending that. Just kind of putting it everywhere, blending it into where I had the lighter powder on my highlighted areas, and just kind of blending everything together. And I'm going into this Beauty Treat Sculpt Highlight and Contour Palette. Actually, I think this is from Style Essentials. It's like a brand at Five Below. I'm taking this dark contour color that, as you can see, I've used a lot of because it's the only shade dark enough to contour me. And I'm just dipping my Wet n Wild contour brush in there and contouring. And then I'm just doing my temples, kind of building up the intensity a bit. This color is a little bit cool tone, but it might just be kind of off looking because my foundation is red. Because normally it doesn't look like this. And I went into the eyeshadow palette and took that dark brown, that like hot pinky shadow, and I dipped my brush into there to go as blush, kind of like a base for my blush, because the blush from the palette is very, very shimmery. So I kind of just used the shimmery blush as like a topper blush. Now I'm doing my lower lashes real quick using the same mascara, which was a struggle because the wand is so thick. And now I'm just smoking out my lower lash line. I kind of just did like the inner quarter and outer because my lashes were still drying, but I am going to go in and, you know, blend everything out on the lower lash line. And I'm just using the same colors that I used in the crease, that hot pink and then that dark pink, and then the light shimmer in the center and in the inner corner. Now I'm just blending out that bake on my under eyes. And I'm just kind of fixing the edges of everything. This is really just where I went in and fixed everything. I blended out my eyeshadow, blended out the rest of my face, and now I'm going to highlight. So I'm taking this very pale pink, and I took a little bit of this deeper color, which is actually a blush shade, but it's so shimmery that it looks like a highlighter. And I'm just going to wet this so that it'll really glow. This is kind of a more natural looking highlight. So I just kind of layered and built the two up. And once you wet them, they do become a lot more intense, but they will emphasize your texture. Now I'm just highlighting the tip of my nose and the bridge of it, my Cupid's bow. And I'm also going to highlight my brow bone with the lighter pink highlight, just using the same little like pointed tip brush that I had used to do my inner corner. And I'm going to set my brows. I'm using the e.l.f. Brow Wow in dark brown or deep brown, one of the two. And I decided to use my contour stick from AOA kind of as like a lip liner. I just needed like a dark base to put a nudie pink kind of lipstick on. So I used that as a base, and now I'm taking this Qibest liquid lipstick in the shade 610. But this shade is a little bit too of a cool tone nude. It's like a little bit too brownish tan. So I went for a pinkier lip color to match the eye better. This one's from Sephora. And I just put that in the center. And now I'm going to put on my Fenty lip gloss. And set my face real quick with the e.l.f. setting spray. And that's it. Bye, guys.